Hey guys, it's Rob. So I'm looking at this motherboard here. This is for an Xbox 360. The Xbox is giving me just red ring of death. It's not an Elite, it's an Xbox 360 traditional. You can see here that the factory die, the thermal paste that's on there is kind of a sloppy job. It's oozed out and leaked everywhere. Seems like they might over apply it a little bit. I don't know which is which. One of these is the GPU, one of them is the CPU. It says right on there, but one of them has kind of two different dyes on it. Right there, so you can see that there's one and then two, and both of those need to be cleaned. You want to take all that paste off of there so it's just shiny, and maybe you can't see your full reflection in it, but it's looking pretty darn clean and free of that. What you have to do that with are several tools that I recommend. I use a razor blade and also a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Just the purest rubbing alcohol you can find is apparently the best, but you can see that I'm just using here, this is 50% rubbing alcohol, so that's not even really the best stuff. So it might be a little bit more labor intensive, but either way it's going to evaporate. It's not going to cause any damage. You want to be pretty sparing in the amount that you use. You're going to use a lot of Q-tips, probably. The first one I did that worked really well. I used kind of some barbecue skewers that were made out of wood. They were a lot like toothpicks, so toothpicks would probably work just as well. And so basically what you're going to do here is you're going to start by taking a Q-tip and wiping some of that stuff off of there, just to make sure that you're not getting too much. I'm tapping over here. You want to make sure you're not getting too much rubbing alcohol all over that Q-tip that you're going to use, and then just sort of apply here and see what you're working with, how difficult the material is to move, and how hardened it is on there. The end objective here is to have all of this stuff removed. Also, you'll see that if you got to this stage right here, then you have already removed the heat sinks for both the GPU and the CPU. They look like this. You remember pulling them off. One of them has like a copper outlet. That's a good idea, I guess. Just a little bit more conductivity, heat conductivity out that way. And then you've got this other heat sink here. Both of these have the same kind of goo on them. A razor blade and Q-tips. You start with just Q-tips and a toothpick and some rubbing alcohol and just kind of clean it up a bit. You do that on this one as well. So once you got those two things kind of cleaned up pretty well, and those two things, or those three things really, if you count that smaller die there, you got them pretty cleaned up with Q-tips and toothpicks, then you're going to want to basically take a little bit of rubbing alcohol. It works well if you drip it off of a Q-tip. Or if you drip it off of a toothpick even, that works probably better because you get smaller quantities that way. And then you're going to take your razor blade, and it's a lot like scraping paint off of a window. If you ever had overspray on a window with paint hardened on it, you just get some rubbing alcohol. Even water will probably work on a window, but here you just want to use strictly a rubbing alcohol. I don't recommend using anything else. It's probably too abrasive. So what happens here while your Xbox is doing this in the first place is that you've got this thermal paste here that's spilling out, and it may be causing some parts of the motherboard to short out. This one's pretty bad, and we'll see if we'll be able to fix it. Hopefully we will. What I would encourage you to do as you approach this project is to familiarize yourself with the tools that you're going to be working with on the first part of it. And that's going to be some things that you're going to need to just open the Xbox. So you'll be able to find tons of other videos online and just direct yourself around as far as how to get the box open without damaging it. You're going to need a couple of tools that aren't really standard. They're going to some bits, and then for the X clamps, I find if you have a nice long just like a pick tool that's really thin. This is the one I used, and that seems to work pretty well. But any kind of computer case, kind of like a default kit you could probably get on Newegg or whatever, will have you know, a good amount of tools in it. In fact, the one that I'm working with over here probably has thermal paste in it also. Just find thermal paste. You can get it at Best Buy. It's like $10. Mine's not right on the desk at the moment, so I can't really show you the exact kind that I have, but it's fairly generic, and I don't think you'll have problems with the quality of the thermal paste that you use. Also, let's see. So once you have those cleaned off, and you take your razor blade and you're just going to move it across the surface really gingerly. So you're just going to be basically scraping back and forth at a really steep angle. The steepest angle you can get is preferable, so that you're not actually inflicting damage onto the die on the CPU or the GPU. And so that's kind of how I hold it, like that, so I can get it nice and low. So you've got that going on. Once you're done there, you're going to let the rubbing alcohol evaporate for maybe 5 minutes or so. Don't worry about it too much. Just make sure, you know, if you used a bunch, give it more time. And then as far as the process of applying new thermal paste is concerned, you know, obviously we can see what happened here was too much was used, so just don't make that same mistake. Make sure that you are testing on a piece of paper, or maybe even a metallic surface if you want to get really good at working with it. Usually it'll come when you buy it with a little spatula or something that you can move it around with. Once I've completed this job here, I will post a video of how to apply the new thermal paste on there, and that's fairly straightforward. You want to take your razor blade over here as well when you're at work on that part of it. You want to be getting that off of the heat sinks with the razor blade, and just make sure that part of it looks really clean as well. You're sort of equally concerned with both, but you could take these and probably, you know, throw them across the room, and it's not going to be a big deal. Well, maybe that one's a little more fragile, but what I mean to say is that these two objects right here are not really more than just sort of blocks of metal. There's nothing fancy going on in there. The dies, on the other hand, are actually where everything is happening. I mean, when you look at this motherboard, and the most important stuff, obviously, is happening right there. So that's why you got to be really careful as you go about this. You know, take your time, move slowly, and get it done correctly.